Shimano says that its EP8 motor puts out 85 Newton meters of torque and 500 watts of power, multiplying the rider's power by 4 times. Is this true? Well, today we're going to put it to the test. Motor and bike manufacturers can advertise to us all day about how much power and torque their bikes have, but it's really hard to know if what they're saying is true, and it gets kind of complicated as far as how that power is delivered and when that torque and power is delivered. And so there's a lot of opportunity to kind of manipulate those numbers or maybe say them in a way that's not completely understandable by the rider. But there's no real way for us to test that and validate it until now. So I've set up a test stand that can test these motors, and it's going to test torque, power curves, power modes, just about everything you will want to know about motors. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do. You're going to learn a lot along with me about many different motors. This is my test stand, and what I've got here is I can set up any e-bike, put these power meter pedals on the bike. I've also got a power meter in the trainer here, so I can check to see what the total power is output of the bike rider combination is, and then I'll know what the power input is of the rider, so I can subtract the two. So I know 3 pieces of information there. I can also calculate torque from that, and cadence and everything else that goes along with the information that comes from these units. I also, wasn't simple, had to rig up something so that the bike would believe that it was moving, because these e-bikes will not work unless you're moving down the road, and they also want to know how fast you're going. So I've got this little motor I've set up to simulate the bike moving. So I've now fooled the bike into thinking it's moving down the road. And from this, I can run the bike through all the modes, all the power settings, can adjust some things, learn all kinds of things about these motors. The other great thing about this setup is it's human powered. I don't have a robot set up to this thing, so we're getting actual simulated rider bike interface data. So I'm going to start running the test. I've got various routines I'm going to put this bike through. I'm going to run the power up as high as I can to see what the max power is. I'm going to put it through a constant resistance run-up test, going up and down in RPM in each one of the modes, so we can see what kind of power multiplication the motor is providing in each of the modes. And we'll learn some things about sort of when the power gets to its maximum, when it starts to shut off, because we know that'll eventually happen, and when the max torque occurs, which I think is going to be really interesting, because we always hear about max torque numbers, but how much does that really matter? When I'm done running these tests, I'll put the information into the computer, we'll do our analysis, we'll see what we can learn from it, and you'll see all the results of the EP8 motor and know everything you ever wanted to know, maybe more. Okay, I ran all the tests, and I've uploaded the data, and I put together some graphs, which I'm going to show you now. The first test I ran it through I ran it through each mode, and I ran the cadence up as the resistance was kept the same. So that allowed me to create a curve for each of these modes. And it's kind of interesting what we've learned here. So this first set of graphs shows, and I'll show this for each mode, shows power, torque, and the power multiplier. So for each of these graphs, you'll see the cadence is listed on the bottom, and we're just running the cadence up and showing how much power, or how much torque, or how much power multiplier, meaning how much the motor multiplied my own power, occurred at each RPM. So you can see this is in boost mode. So the Shimano EP8 has 3 modes: boost, trail, and eco, each one descending in assistance. Boost should give us the most power, and it did. But the power peaked at about in the low 400s. And I'll show you later where it got to 450, but just for a brief period of time. And I think they advertise it at 500 watts. So I'm only seeing a little over 400. happens at about 70 to 80 RPM, right in the sort of middle of the graph there. And the torque started out high and descended as the cadence went up, which is what you would expect from a motor naturally. It's just harder for a motor to put out torque the faster it spins. Same with our legs. Power multiplier did the same thing. It pretty much follows torque. But the power multiplier for the boost mode was 4 times the rider power, which is what Shimano advertised. So they're right on as far as that goes. But max power, as I said, maybe is 450. Max torque turns out not to be a real important number, except at that point at which you get max power output, which is in that 70 to 80 RPM range. So max torque of this motor is advertised at 85 Newton meters. I didn't see that. It probably occurs down below 40 RPM in cadence, which is a really slow cadence if you're not familiar with what your cadence is, but that's going pretty slow in terms of pedaling. So it's possible it gets to 85 Newton meters, but at a really slow cadence. And I would say this is the mode that is the most torquey, meaning it's giving you a lot of torque, a lot of input with a lot of power output without a lot of input at that low RPM. So let's move on to trail. Trail is very different. Trail power peaks, again, similar, maybe a little bit higher, because they've got a little bit more to work with in terms of the power output for the motor, because you're not trying to max it out. But interestingly, the torque is a very flat curve in this case. And the power multiplier kind of follows that. So this is going to be a much more natural feeling setting. If you want a natural feeling motor and you have the EP8, I would suggest running it in trail mode. It's not going to give you as much assistance, but it's going to feel much more natural, much more like your legs are providing the power. Now, a natural feel from the motor is exactly what Shimano advertises on their website. They sort of promote the trail mode as a great mode of power to use when you're out there on the trail. So let's go to the eco mode. So this is the first one that they really dropped the power on. You saw in the trail and the boost mode, we had somewhere near 400 watts in both of those, but in the eco mode, we really only got a maximum of about 200 watts of power output from the motor. The torque is rampy. It kind of goes up and it goes down, and same with the power multiplier. So this is a little bit different than the other modes. It is going to feel a lot less like you're getting assistance, and it does max out at about 1x or 1 times multiplier times your force input. So the next thing I did was I plotted the power of all the modes together, and so you can compare them, and we've talked about this, but you can see the power curves are very different in each of the modes, and they do require a different style of riding, where the eco mode for the most part sort of really wants you to ride at that sort of 80 to 90 RPM range, or you're not going to get a lot of help. The torque curves, you can see the boost torque curve really drops down just like a motor naturally would. The trail mode is very consistent, giving you that natural feel. And again, the eco mode wants you to ride at that 70 to 90 RPM all day. So, and if you look at the multipliers, very different as well. The power multiplier drops down pretty significantly in the boost mode, but you are still getting a lot of power, so you probably don't feel it as much. So please let me know what you think of these tests. I've learned a lot doing this myself. I have lots of other things I plan to do with these, but I'd really like to hear what you would like to see done with these tests. I'll be testing different settings. I'll be testing different motors. I'll even check sort of what the software updates will do as we get software updates to these motors. There's a lot I can do with this setup and this testing lab that I'm setting up. Please subscribe. Please give it a thumbs up. Give me your comments. Check out the video here on the TQ motor that I tested before I had this lab set up. I did it out on the road because of its computer display. But this testing system is really going to let me explore in depth a lot about what these motors do. See you next time.